Story 1. I discovered that my husband faked his own death to cover up his depravity. Part 1. I need to know if I am overreacting. This situation was already crazy. I'll give a quick TLDR, but it's an unbelievable story. I, Emily 35F, have been married to my husband Walt for 6 years. We have 2 kids, Paul 10M and Brian 5M. 11 years ago, when Walt and I were engaged, he went missing during a vacation trip to Thailand. He was missing for nearly 5 years, and told us all he had been in a Cambodian prison that whole time. I found out right after he left for the trip I was pregnant with Paul. I became extremely close with his family during this time. I also met and fell in love with a man named Kevin, who I was engaged to. When Walt returned, I found myself torn between picking up where we left off and continuing with Kevin. I chose to give Walt and I a chance. We got married a week later and I was pregnant with Brian in less than a year. I thought things had been fine in our relationship. We loved each other, and despite him being a workaholic, we were mostly happy. I have never been one to indulge myself with a professional massage. I like having my shoulders or feet rubbed by Walt. It's just to me a luxury expense, and I haven't ever been willing to go. Walt's been a little bit more distant lately, and I have been feeling a little stressed with work. I have this coworker who has been pushing me, saying the place she goes is amazing. It doesn't matter who you get, they're all good, and to just go. I did just that. I walked in and asked if they had any availability. The guy at the desk said they did and took down some information. He said it would just be like 5 to 10 minutes. That's when I noticed the small bulletin behind the desk had 3 pictures from the security camera and a note above that said, "Permanent ban." I did a double take and swore that the one guy looks just like Walt. I'm staring at this picture when the front desk attendant asks if something's wrong. I tell him, "I think I know that guy in the picture. How do you get on a banned list?" He says, "Oh, it's our owner's policy if anyone asks for a happy ending." I was aghast at that moment. People do that. He replied, "Yeah, not very often, it's rare, but it does happen, and sadly it seems to always happen to the same person." He then apologized for oversharing, and I told him not to worry about it. He said Lisa was ready for me. She was standing at the entrance of the hall. She was a maybe 5 feet 1 inch and 110 pounds Asian American woman. I just had a feeling this was the massage therapist that always got these creeps. We went back and I enjoyed the massage with some light small talk. Her accent was totally Midwestern. This was a woman who grew up here, and probably several generations before had as well. I found out she had worked at this particular place for 3 years. As we finished, I couldn't help myself and I had to know, so I just came with the truth. This is very hard to say, but I noticed the list of banned guys. One of them is my husband. Were you by chance his massage therapist? She looked at me with genuine concerns as my eyes filled and said, "I had to be because all 3 guys were my clients. Which one was he?" I said, "The one in the orange shirt." She said, "Oh, yes, I'm very sorry." I began to cry, and said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed, and so sorry, I can't believe he did that to you." "Did he just outright ask?" She said, "This is going to be hard to hear, but you need to know the truth if that's your husband. I brought him into the room same as you and left while he got ready. When I knocked he said he was ready, but when I walked in he was laying face up, fully erect and holding some amount of cash. I immediately left the room and called for Jake, our front desk guy. He escorted the men out. I wanted to throw up. I composed myself and apologized again. I ended giving her like a $100 tip. I went straight home and began prepping to leave. Then this sudden wave of calm hit me, and I realized I needed to know how far this went. I did my best to play normal. When he finally got home from work, I just treated it like a normal night. When he went to bed, I used the opportunity to go through his phone. Texts were clean, no Snapchat, WhatsApp, etc. I clicked on his Reddit. There were his 4 posts from when he came back home from his imprisonment. I had seen these before. I was about to give up when I noticed I could switch between accounts. I was disgusted by what I found. He was joined to all Asian women fetish subs and massage subs. The chats were worse. As I read through them, most were just faceless women, probably men pretending actually that he was sexting with. But there was one that he was definitely seeing. There were details of meetups and how much he would pay. What he wanted her to wear or do. He was paying a sex worker for happy ending massages. He kept referring to her as Sok. A quick Google search told me this was a common Cambodian name, probably wasn't really her name, but he was paying for the fantasy. There was another conversation on there, which as I read seemed very familiar. That's when I realized it was Jorge on the other end. They were both covering for each other for years through various affairs. As I scrolled through their long conversation history, I came across the most knife-twisting part. They had been just talking BS like any other time, and Walt was telling him about his upcoming appointment. Jorge says, "I bet you wish you could have just stayed in Cambodia, not have to do all this shit." Walt replies, "Yeah, but what are you gonna do? I got deported, lol." Jorge follows, "Well, you were cheating on her too. I'm surprised she didn't turn you in the first time she caught you." Walt, "Yeah, she was still holding out hope until the second time. It was all fake. It was lies. He was never in prison. He left me. I slept on the couch that night and told him I just fell asleep out there. The next day I asked Jorge to come meet me on the pretense of needing help with something. When he arrived, I showed him the evidence I had of his affair, and told him it was going to his whole family if he didn't tell me the whole truth right now. Jorge laid it all out to me. Walt has been obsessed with Asian porn since high school. Notably happy ending massage fantasy. When we started together, it was because I had the right optics. Jorge said Walt does love me as his wife, he just has this addiction. I told him to stop with that shit, and let me know about Cambodia. Prior to his trip, Walt had been engaging in an online affair with a Cambodian woman for 2 years. That means it started after we were together. Our bachelor trip was his chance to meet up with her in person. What I didn't know is he had gotten his passport and visas for both Thailand and Cambodia. Jorge didn't want to go to Cambodia, and Walt had only ever mentioned a desire to visit Thailand, so that became their cover. They arrived the first morning and took a week's worth of selfies together around the resort. At that point, Walt left and went to meet this woman in Cambodia. He was there for 3 days with her, when he decided he was in love. She was from a well enough off family. He wanted more. So he and Jorge concocted his disappearance. At first he was only going to stay for the first 30 days, then show back up, but when it was done he got his visa extended another 30 days. He couldn't extend it past that, so he just didn't. He hid there with her. However, being the bad person he is, he began cheating on her as well. She caught him and kept him around because he was telling her he would help her immigrate to the States as his wife. After 4.5 years she caught him again, and not only dumped him but reported him, and he got deported. He had to come clean to his parents, who I had grown close to. They feared losing contact with their grandson and chose to hide all of this from me. Which was a betrayal so hard to hear after being in each other's lives for so long. They also told Walt to leave me alone, but at the same time wanted him to have a relationship with our son. WTF, I don't know how they thought those two things wouldn't conflict. He ignored that and made the effort to rekindle our relationship. When he had won, his dad made him marry me right away and told him to stop all of his terrible behaviors. He was hoping this would straighten Walt out now that he had his fun. Instead, all that happened was I threw away the best guy in the world for a workaholic porn addict with a creepy fetish. I feel so stupid. I headed home. I knew Jorge would inform Walt. I went ahead and sent Jorge's whole family the evidence of his infidelity. I then sent Walt's out to everyone I knew as well. By time Walt came home, which was way earlier than he ever had, he was fuming and getting bombarded with messages. I already had my car loaded with mine and kids' things. My best friend had taken the kids earlier. Walt came at me with attitude and I was ready to fight. He switched approaches and I tried to gaslight me and explain. I wasn't having it. I told him I knew about everything: Cambodia, the porn, the sex worker. He told me she's not a sex worker, just a college student in need of extra money. I screamed back at him, that's FING worse, now you're just taking advantage of a young girl in need. He suddenly shut up after that, and I told him he could expect divorce papers and nothing else. Then I left. It's been a few weeks. I feel like an idiot for not figuring this out. I'm starting to notice the signs I overlooked and that I was keeping myself blind to them. The long hours at work even though we don't need it, the starting of his own bank account from our joint account, the fact he signs up or agrees to every business trip or conference. It was just his way of feeding his depravity. The worst part is he came back for me. He could have came back and left me alone. I could have married Kevin, and now knowing what I gave him up for, I hate myself even more. Now, where I am getting some push that I'm overreacting. I am pushing for 100% custody and no visitation for him in the interim. I have evidence of porn addiction, work addiction, and visiting sex workers. I am also going 100% no contact with his parents. A few people, not many, are saying I should not try to cut the father and grandparents out of my kids' lives. I, however, disagree and feel Walt is a danger to them given his self-destructive and manipulative behavior. His parents will only get the time he gets, and at this point, I'm at best offering weekly supervised visits. Otherwise, they are not to be in my life to any degree. What do you all think? Is this too much? Should I let them be in my kids' lives? He is a good father when he's there, and they are great grandparents, but I can't get over the fact it's all built on lies and manipulation. I discovered that my husband faked his own death to cover up his depravity. Part 2. So last year something unexpected happened. I was in a bitter custody dispute with my lying, cheating ex-husband. Ever since I found out about his cheating 3 years earlier, he had been making my life hell. The divorce took forever, he snowballed the price of our house, and then he fought every custody decision along the way. The unexpected thing was my ex-fiancé, Kevin, figured out that my ex-husband was bragging about this on Reddit. Out of nowhere he emailed me the evidence, and it helped tremendously in court. I was really excited when I first heard from Kevin, and tried to engage with him on a personal level. He didn't want that, and I understood. I hurt him more than he ever deserved. I wish I could go back and do it all over again, because believe me, hindsight is 20/20, and this was probably the biggest mistake of my life. Although I attempted to reach him, he blocked me. When he did that, I took the hint and let it go. However, I can't stop thinking about him. I just feel like he wouldn't have helped me like that if he didn't still have some sort of feelings for me. He very well could have just turned the other cheek. I'm really thinking about reaching out to him. I don't know what his relationship status is, but I think it's worth a shot. I honestly never thought I would hear from him again. So it almost feels like fate that he was the one to save me. I've been checking around the different platforms, and it seems he still doesn't do social media. I know his email, so I'm thinking about creating a new one so I can message him. If he tells me he's married or seeing someone, I'll let this go, but at this point I feel like I need to try. I'm still kicking myself for letting him go all those years ago. He was really the most wonderful man and a great dad to my son. This has to be my chance at make things right, don't you think? Would you go for it? I think I'm going to go for it. Story 2. My girlfriend told me she was pregnant, so I had arranged to move all her stuff out behind her back. If you only read the title, I might sound like a bad guy. But I'm not. I've known I wanted to be child-free since my early teens. My parents didn't oppose me, but they did say I could change my mind. Since I'm not an only child, they'll still get grandchildren. When I was 20, I got a vasectomy. When I was 22, I met my girlfriend. I've been open about wanting to be child-free from the very beginning. I remember telling her about my vasectomy, but to be honest, I think there was already alcohol involved. So I'm not sure if she remembers. We were dating for a year and a half when she moved in with me. I'm now 25. 2 weeks ago, I got home from work, and my girlfriend was standing in the living room smiling. She showed me the positive pregnancy test. Thinking it was a TikTok prank, I played along. When she didn't reveal it was a prank, I knew what had happened, but I continued playing along. That night, I got up at midnight and started sending emails. I took a week off work and emailed my best friends the details, telling them to pretend they knew nothing and be prepared. The next morning, I left for work as usual, but I didn't go to work. Carl, one of my friends, was waiting outside. He had a cap and a hoodie ready for me. The whole week, we followed Katie, and on day 3, she met up with her affair partner. We followed them to a motel, and then Carl followed him to his home. The guy was married with kids. We devised a plan. I convinced Katie to go to her parents' house to tell them the good news last Saturday. While there, I gave my friends the keys to my home. At Katie's parents' house, we had lunch with the parents and siblings first, and then Katie told them the good news. Everyone was happy. After a while, I got a call I had to take. It was my friends telling me they were done and ready. So I asked to make an announcement. I pulled Katie aside in front of everyone. I bet they thought I was going to propose. I started by telling how we met, how much she meant to me, and ended with, and that's why it hurt so much that you cheated on me and got pregnant by someone else. The room was silent. Katie looked shocked. She started telling me it wasn't a funny joke. I said I'm not joking. The moment you told me you were pregnant, I knew you cheated. I got a vasectomy 5 years ago, and I go to checkups every year. So if you're pregnant, you have cheated. At that moment, her phone rang. I told her to answer it. It was probably AP's full name. You know, the real father of your baby. Probably wants to talk about you moving in. Not sure if his wife and kids are going to like that. What happened was that my friends had loaded up everything of Katie's in a U-Haul and brought it to AP's home. When they called me, they were in front of his home for the final part. They rang the doorbell and asked the AP where they could put her things. He was confused, and they handed him and his wife a folder with pictures of him and Katie. And Carl said, since OP is kicking her out, she needs a place to stay. We're just here delivering her things. And since you don't want the woman who is pregnant with your child to stay on the street, we assumed you would take her in. AP called Katie yelling that she ruined his life and he never wants to see her again. After hearing him scream over the phone, I said, oh, so his wife doesn't want his mistress and their affair baby living there. So you'll have to stay here. With your parents. With that, I walked away, leaving a crying Katie and her confused and angry family behind. My friends brought the U-Haul with her stuff to her parents' house after the AP refused to accept it. I went home where my sister was waiting for me. She knew everything. This was not part of my plan, but Carl knows me so well. I broke down and cried in my sister's arms. She stayed the weekend taking care of me, allowing me to grieve and process the betrayal. Story 3. My mother remarried a narcissist. How could you do this to your own mother? My mom screamed down the phone to me. This was the first time she had contacted me for 5 years. Brandon turned 21 last week, but to get to that sentence I need to start at the beginning. My mother Jane, 49F, had me with my father Andrew who died when I was 4. They did not marry, so from 4 until I was 10 it was just my mother and me. When I was 10 my mother introduced me to Michael, 52M, and his daughter Grace, 19F. Michael is a weekend dad to Grace. When we first met, he was nice enough. He was not trying to be a second dad, but he was pleasant enough. He proposed to my mom. She asked me what I thought, and I said I was okay with it. My first mistake. They started bringing Grace around and I liked her. She was nice, she was very pretty, and we played video games. When I was 11 Michael and mom got married and Michael moved into our house. When I was 13 mom gave birth to my half-brother Justin, 8M. Michael decided to be more dominant in the house. He would punish me for not doing chores. He tried giving my room to Grace, but I refused, and Grace told him she would not take it. He would pick fights and then lie to my mom telling her I was being disrespectful. My mom believed him. I was constantly grounded, and my life was miserable. On my 14th birthday I tried to end it all. My mom was sitting by my hospital bed crying. Michael growled at me that he wished I succeeded. I was taken in by my father's parents. They refused to let me go back. My grandma said something at the time that I thought was strange. She told them that they will regret treating me so badly. Michael scoffed thinking he had all the power and told her to get out of his house. My mom looked sad. My grandma said it wasn't his house and was about to say something else, but mom stopped her. A year later I went back for Christmas and Michael was intolerable and my mom was indifferent. They lavished gifts on Grace and Justin. I got a book token and a card. Grace hit the roof calling both my mom and Michael assholes and that they should be ashamed of themselves. On my 16th birthday my mother did not ring me. Michael sent me a message saying to never contact them again. I was not welcome in my home and that my mother did not want to see me ever again. I cried myself to sleep for a week. All this time my grandma said do not worry. I received a happy birthday message from Grace. It basically says she knows her dad is in a hole and that she cannot wait to go no contact with him. I threw myself into school and graduated as valedictorian and was awarded a scholarship to MIT. I started to look for jobs, but grandma told me that I had a trust fund for college. My father had owned his own business and was wealthy and had left my grandmother the trustee of his wealth and my college fund. I worked hard at college and am starting my final year of my engineering major next fall. I have a girlfriend called Sarah. It is casual, but we are having fun. My 21st birthday was last week. I celebrated it with my college buddies, then went to grandma's to spend it with my dad's family. My Aunt Ruth asked me what I was going to do with the house. I said what? That is when Uncle Roger told me that the house my mom and Michael are living in belongs to me. Everything in the house belongs to me. My parents were not married, and the entire estate was left to me with my grandma as the trustee until I reached 21. The business has been run by Uncle Roger for me. It turns out Michael is one of my employees. I will receive a stipend from the trust until I am 30 and then I gain full control of the trust. I asked Uncle Roger if he could carry on running the business. He agreed instantly. I also gained control of all my father's real estate portfolio. I own pretty much every house in my family, including my mom's, so I went to an attorney on Monday morning, and we discussed everything. I decided at that moment that I was going to evict my mother and her husband from my home. So, my attorney sent them a 30-day notice to quit the property. Hence the phone call from my mother this morning. She was berating me that I was made to listen how I was a horrible son, but we were family. How could I do this to my brother? Why am I still holding a grudge? Just keep the peace. After her rant, I calmly as I could, I was mad, told her that I had not seen her in 6 years. That she chose Michael over her own son, and she let Michael treat me badly for the years and she knew I owned that home. Yet she and Michael pushed me out. I hung up on her and was tempted to block her number. I am second-guessing whether I am doing the right thing. My mother remarried a narcissist, part 2. I know it has been only a week, but so much has happened it is unreal. So, the day after I hung up on my mom, I switched my phone onto silent mode and went out with Sarah. The following morning, I had 102 missed calls from several numbers, the majority of them being Michael's. I also had several messages that ranged from him trying to be nice to talk about the misunderstanding to anger that I was not answering, to threats that he was going to come to my school and kick my ass. As I was walking through campus, I bumped into Grace. I may have forgotten, but Grace had started at MIT last year. We bumped into each other, and we started to chat sometimes. I have Grace in my friend group. Grace tried to cut off Michael after that Christmas and refused to go back to the house, but she still had to have phone calls until she was 16. She also went NC with him on her 16th birthday. She occasionally speaks to my mom, but as Michael tries to take over, it is only when my mom is on her own, usually when Michael is at work. Your father is trying to contact me, I tell her. She asked why. I told her about the fact that I actually owned their house and sent them a 30-day notice. She was shocked. She told me her dad thought it was my mom's and he had been trying to get her to sell it and buy somewhere else after I left, but she kept saying she could not. Michael was not pleased. He asked why, and she kept telling Michael was that because it was my home. Michael said I did not live here anymore, and it did not matter, but now Grace realized that mom was telling Michael that I owned the home. He was just misinterpreting what she was saying. As we were talking, my phone rang again. Grace asked if it was her dad. I said no, it was my grandma, mom's mom. Grandma was screaming down the phone. How could I do that to my mom after what I did to her years ago? I hung up on her and blocked her number, after what I had done to her years ago. She was the one who abandoned me for some hole. Michael rang again. I picked up this time. He was yelling, calling me ungrateful after he had raised me, and I should just give them my house, and I was making my brother and sister homeless. I told him I had no siblings and he did not raise me, and he can go F himself, and hung up and blocked him. Grace looked at me and said, "Sister, but I do not go there anymore." I told her I did not know, then we parted ways and went to class. Then my mom's family were making posts on social media on how I was abandoning the family again, how I was ungrateful, and how I am still holding a grudge for all these years. Then a lot of the posts got taken down the next day. Uncle Roger messaged me saying he was dealing with it. Turns out 90% of my mom's family work in my company, and if the chairman of the board tells you to take something down, you do it. Well, this morning my mom's father phoned me and asked if I would come to their house tomorrow for a family meeting over the house. He says we need to clear the air. I asked if I could bring a couple of people for support. He said yes, so I phoned Grandma and Uncle Roger. I also messaged Grace and asked her if she would like to come too. I am waiting for Grace's reply. My mother remarried a narcissist, part 3. So, I went to my grandparents' house, and it was a whole storm has hit. First things first, my mom and Michael had a second child, Freya, 2F, obviously as Grace and I had been non-contact, we did not know. I will start with when we arrived at my maternal grandparents' house. Sarah, Grandma, Uncle Roger, and Grace decided to come. I walked in and all my mom's side of the family seemed to be there. They looked angry until Uncle Roger walked in, and then a few of them started to disperse. Funny that your boss walks into a room and your ego gets deflated. My maternal grandma started to speak, telling me I was selfish and ungrateful, that I was breaking my mother's heart again, that I was throwing away family and that I should treat them better. Michael then chirped in to show gratitude for raising me that I should sign over the house to him. I was about to blow up, until my grandma interrupted and asked him what he meant by raising him. She raised me from the time I was 14 after I had attempted to take my own life due to his bullying of me. The room went silent, and everyone looked from me to Mom and Michael. She then spoke and said, "Jane, I told you that I would have evicted you if you did not let me take him, as I was responsible for the house. He was not safe there. You blamed everyone but that man. You even chose him by abandoning your son on his 16th birthday. I had to comfort him for weeks after that and get him therapy." She then turned to my other grandparents and asked where they had been for the last 6 years. My mom started crying and said that she did not abandon me, I abandoned her. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked her. "I have your message from Michael, the one where he told me you no longer wanted me to contact you anymore. You did not even wish me a happy birthday." I pulled out my phone and opened my phone and scrolled past the recent messages from Michael to the message he sent that day. "Well, after the messages you sent me, why shouldn't he have sent that?" my mother yelled. "I did not send you any messages. What are you talking about? The messages that you sent me, telling me you hated me and that I failed you and that I was worthless and a bad mother." My mother replied, seething. My mother's family were stood around nodding. I was about to say something when Uncle Roger piped up, "Show us the messages." My mother grabbed her phone. Michael suddenly looked scared and tried to stop Mom from handing her phone to us. There were several messages on there from after Christmas that year up until my birthday, saying how much I hated her, how she ruined Christmas, how she was selfish and never loved me, and that I wanted nothing to do with her or her husband and their kid. There were also lots of messages wishing me a Merry Christmas and a happy birthday and that she missed me, up until I turned 19, then they just stopped. As I was looking, there was something strange. "Why are these messages green?" I asked my mother. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked. "I have an iPhone, so do you. If you are sending messages to me, they should be blue, not green. Green means that it was sent over SMS. I opened my contact on my mother's phone. There were 2 cell numbers saved under my name. The first one was mine, the second one was a number I did not know. I rang the second number, and a ringtone came from Michael's pocket. The entire room looked at Michael. He ran out of the house and got in his car and drove off. I gave my mother her phone back and told her when she was ready to apologize, she could contact me. I left. Grace got in the car and started screaming, "How could my father be so low? My mother remarried a narcissist." Part 4. It is 2 days since my last post. I would have updated sooner, but I had stuff going on. Firstly, my mom, sister and brother are currently staying with me at my apartment as Michael does not know where I live. Secondly, Michael no longer works for me and is currently in police custody. I am running ahead of myself, so I will start with Sarah, and I dropped Grace off, and then I took Sarah back to her dorm and then just got back to my apartment and finished my last update when my maternal grandma rang asking if I could come back to their house. My grandma was there looking somber, and my mom was sat there sobbing. She looked at me and I could see the red welt around her left eye. I knew instantly what had happened. Michael had punched her. My grandma asked if I could take my mom home with me as no one knew where I lived, and Michael will no doubt try to come here and force my mother back. So, I agreed to take my mother and my half-siblings back with me. So, after we got back and put my brother and sister to bed, I sat and had a conversation with my mother. She told me she had left the kids with her mom and went back to the house to speak to Michael. She said he tried to gaslight her, telling her that it was not what she thought. She shouted at him to explain himself then. The story goes like this. After the Christmas that I got the book token, my mom flipped out on Michael as he had taken all the presents she got for me and gave them to Grace and Justin. She could not take the presents away from Grace and especially Justin, so she had to take Grace's rage and my indifference. As I had tried to end it all earlier that year, she was already annoyed with him. She had realized he was bullying me and pushed away her son. The thing that got Michael was Grace's reaction. She went home to her mom and refused to return. She hated how her father treated me, and that was the end of their relationship. Michael blamed me, so he decided to put another phone number as my contact with my mom. He then sent the messages to my mom claiming I hated her to get her away from me and have his perfect little family. My mom was never really tech savvy and did not realize that iMessage and SMS were things. My mom and Michael had a serious row. Michael told her he was the man of the house, and I disrespected him in his own home. My mom pointed out it was my house, not his, so he was not the man of the house, and then she told Michael to get out of the house. He lost his temper and punched my mom. I let mom have my bed and I slept on the couch. The next day I called Grace and Sarah and had them look after the kids whilst I took my mom to the police station to file a report. Whilst my mom was filing the report, I phoned my Uncle Roger, who confirmed he was at his desk. When she finished, I told the officers of his location. My Uncle Roger told me what happened. The police arrived, and he took them into a meeting room downstairs. He then had security go to get Michael and escorted him to the same meeting room. He was taken in and arrested on the spot. He was also informed he was fired. He is due in court in the morning where he will probably be given a restraining order against my mom, and we are going today to change the locks on the house. Michael, when he is released, can come by with an officer to get his stuff and then never darken my door again. I have not forgiven my mom for the years of abuse she allowed by Michael and the alienation, but I have asked we go to therapy. I hope we can get past this. My mother remarried a narcissist Part 5. So, it is 2 years since I last posted. Sarah and I are no longer a thing. She could not take any more of the drama and broke things off. I do not blame her. I want to say I am upset, but I really was not. Michael was released the afternoon after my last post and was given a restraining order, so a police officer accompanied him to the house to get his stuff. He was told he was only allowed one trip. I had a locksmith waiting who changed the locks as soon as he left. Then he started to ramp up his entitlement. He first tried to sue for the house, claiming that it was first marital property and then that I said they could have the house, though he lacked evidence. He tried suing for unemployment benefits as he didn't receive any as he was fired for cause. He tried suing for attorney fees, child support, alimony, literally anything. Once the divorce was finalized, he was awarded supervised visitation, once a fortnight. He was ordered to pay child support and alimony. He tried to argue that I had the means to support everyone, but the judge pointed out that I am not responsible for providing for his children. He also found it difficult finding a job as the company will only give dates and cause of leaving as a reference. My mom and I have been having therapy and going through a lot of feelings, the main one being the fact that she never listened to me and always took Michael's side. She apologized almost 1,000,000 times. I have moved back into my house to help with my siblings and have started to work at my company. I started as an engineer. My uncle said I could have any job, but I told him if I want to take over, I need to work with the guys on the floor and get to know them first. Most of the guys I work with are great. There is a couple on the janitorial team who are AHs. One of them is called Richard but insists everyone calls him Flash. Apparently, he was a big deal football player in high school. I met a girl last year who works near a coffee shop that I frequent. Her name is Olivia, 22F. We started dating and it is getting serious. She loves Freya and Justin. Freya absolutely adores Olivia. Every time she visits her and Freya must have a tea party. If Grace is here too, she also must join. On Grace, she is in her final year and had met a guy named Trevor. He is quite shy, but he makes Grace happy. I will update if anything exciting happens, but I must go and meet Olivia as she has some news for me. Story 4. I just found out why my wedding started late and I love my husband more because of it. My husband, John Bucky, M26, and I, F24, just returned from our week-long honeymoon 2 weeks ago. We call my husband Bucky because he resembles the character from the MCU movies. My Bucky is a bit more yummy. Yesterday was the first time we had dinner with his family since the wedding. My sister-in-law, F20, is my favorite person besides my husband, which is why she was my maid of honor. She took me aside and told me what happened behind the scenes at my wedding. A bit of background first. My mother-in-law, F48, never liked me, and she didn't hide it from me, though she did hide it from her son. This started from the moment we began dating. She would play nice in front of him but make nasty comments as soon as he was out of sight. At first, I didn't say anything to Bucky, hoping that, in time, his mother would warm up to me. But it never stopped. Eventually, I had enough and started telling Bucky. Bucky spoke with his mother, but she claimed I was misunderstanding her. She didn't stop, she just became subtler, saying things that could be interpreted in multiple ways. I don't blame Bucky, he did believe me, but he also believed his mother when she said she meant something else. When Bucky proposed, I thought that would be the end of it, but she only got sneakier. I almost called off the wedding because I couldn't handle it anymore. We had arguments, and it was frustrating. Bucky always believed me but didn't believe it was his mother's intent to be hurtful. Somehow, we got through it and started planning the wedding. My sister-in-law helped with the wedding planning and preparations, and because my mother-in-law was minimally involved, everything was perfect. From my perspective, everything went as planned on the wedding day, though we started a bit later. Bucky told me it couldn't be avoided because something important came up last minute. I assumed it was work-related, so I didn't ask. But now I've heard from my sister-in-law what actually happened. I was in the bridal suite, so I didn't see or hear any of this. My mother-in-law arrived at the venue wearing white. When Bucky found out, he asked my sister-in-law to bring her to his ready room, along with his other siblings and father. When my mother-in-law walked in and tried to hug him, Bucky stopped her. He asked what she was wearing, and when she dismissed it, he repeated the question differently. Why was she wearing white at his wedding? Why was she trying to hurt his soon-to-be wife? Why was she trying to ruin his wedding day? I think phrasing it as his day rather than my day got to his mother. He reminded her that it was his wedding too. She still tried to dismiss it, saying he was overreacting and it was just a dress. That's when he lost it. He started yelling at his mother, saying that he now realized I wasn't misunderstanding her, she was deliberately being hurtful to me. He yelled that he had been defending her to me all this time, but now it was clear that I was the one who needed defending. He accused his mother of trying to sabotage his relationship. When my father-in-law tried to say something, Bucky shut him down, saying he didn't want to hear it because they had stood by and enabled her behavior. Bucky then told his mother, "Because you're my mother, I'm willing to postpone the wedding by half an hour to give you a chance to change. I don't care if you go home, to a store, or wherever. Just leave now and only come back when you've changed. If you refuse, you will never see me, my wife, or our future children ever again. Do I make myself clear?" The wedding was perfect, and my mother-in-law wore a blue dress. I don't know how to thank this man enough. His birthday is in 3 months, and I'm going to have to plan something extra special. Story 5. Ada for laughing in my son-in-law's face when she DNA tested my daughter. I, 30M, have a daughter who's 6. I am not biologically related to her at all. There is no blood relation between us. I was friends with her mother for most all of my childhood. We were never involved romantically and were always just friends. She had her daughter at 23 with her 25-year-old husband. When my daughter was a newborn, about 3 months technically, both her mother and father were killed. I won't go into too much detail for privacy reasons, but it was workplace shooting. My friend and her husband had worked in the same building, and were both killed. Both my friend and her husband had grown up with less than ideal families and didn't have any siblings, so there wasn't any next of kin for their daughter to go to. However, because I was close with them, I was able to adopt her. Even though I had been iffy about the idea of kids, I didn't want their daughter to grow up in foster care or around people who didn't have a connection to her bio parents, so I stepped in. My parents and siblings know that my daughter is not my actual daughter biologically speaking. My daughter, I'll call Lily for the post, also knows that she's adopted. I never really hid the fact that she was adopted. She knows her parents are dead and were killed by a bad man, but I'm saving the details for when she's older. Lily does not look like me at all. She looks exactly like her mother and biological dad. Most people assume that I'm her bio dad and that she just took after her mom. I don't ever really correct this when and if people assume this because it just seems unnecessary. My brother has been with his fiancée for about 2 years now. A few weeks ago we were all meeting up at my parents' house and my SIL saw an old picture of me, my friend and her husband. She pointed to my friend and asked who she was, and I explained that was Lily's mother. SIL got quiet and stood in front of the picture for a while. I didn't think much of it. To clarify, she knows my friend died, but I guess didn't know that she had been married, or that Lily is not my bio daughter. I suppose she assumed my daughter was mine and my friend's biological daughter. My SIL got a DNA test done on my daughter behind my back. She used my brother's DNA for the test, and when it came back that they weren't related, she knew that meant me and Lily weren't related. She came up to me with the results and waved them in my face, saying that I was taking care of a dead woman's affair baby. She said this to me in front of my daughter. I just stared at her for a while before bursting out laughing at this. I told her I knew Lily wasn't my biological daughter, and that this thing called adoption exists. Her face went red and she stormed off. My brother is mad I embarrassed his fiancée, but I said she embarrassed herself by DNA testing a kid that isn't hers and then parading the results up to me. What did she want me to do? What was her goal with this? Did she want me to break down and abandon my daughter? My brother said she thought she was doing the right thing and called me an a-hole. I don't feel like the a-hole, especially considering my son-in-law was the one who stuck her nose where it doesn't belong. I'm asking for Reddit opinions, mostly just for validation, so was I the a-hole? Story 6. Almost died. I was 19 and in a car accident. I am now 20 years old. It was around 11 a.m. and me and my friends wanted to go on a drive because I just recently bought a new car. I didn't work this day but they did, so I drove to work to meet up with them. We had a small photo shoot and were deciding where to go to. One of my friends decided to head towards the hills to a popular viewpoint in the city. We took some more pictures and set off. That is all I remember of that day. Next, I remember waking up from a coma in the hospital, missing my left hand, my left eye seemingly shut, and not being able to walk. This was 9 months later. I was told that en route to the hills we were on a freeway and a Dodge Challenger driving 150 miles per hour slammed into my gas tank. I drove a small coupe and it quickly went up into flames. They say I must have passed out due to the impact, where I received a traumatic brain injury. 90% of my body was burned as a result. I was told that in a rush I fell off that overpass over 50 feet, broke my femur, hip, ribs and my pelvis, and continued to burn on the ground. I underwent over 21 surgeries and procedures, including recreation of my left eye, skin grafting, and hip pinning. I had just got a promotion at my job after a year and finally had enough to put a down payment on a brand new car that I had bought all by myself. My family visited me every day in the hospital, and for that I'm forever grateful, but I don't know what to do now. I don't feel comfortable going outside or having other people see me. It feels as if everything I was taken from me that night. Story 7. My partner cheated and I lost everything. I, 24F, and my ex-L, 27M, had been together for 6.5 years and had started dating when I was an undergrad. He moved with me to a new city for my graduate degree, where we adopted 2 cats and got engaged January of 23. He had met B, 20F, at work and we all became close friends. We let her stay with us for a week when she needed to escape her ex and helped her move into her new place. In June, L started a massive argument right before we went on vacation and broke the news that he thought he was poly and wanted to be able to explore this, or he thought he might have to leave me at some point. I'm extremely monogamous and this made me very uncomfortable, but to save my relationship I agreed to try things out casually with B, because I'm bi and I trusted her enough to be vulnerable. My one rule was that nothing sexual should happen with her while the other wasn't there. Fast forward several weeks and he is spending a ton of time with her when I'm not around, including when I'm out of town with friends. When I got back, my anxiety that something had happened was overwhelming and I had a breakdown asking if he had cheated while I was gone. He blew up saying he was hurt, and barely spoke to me for a week. One night I couldn't sleep and went through his phone, for which I had standing permission to do, and found out he had sexted her multiple times while I was in the room, which broke all my rules. I confronted him with the evidence and instead of trying to work it out he said he was moving out. This moving out process took a month. After attempting to remain friends, B blew up at me. B threatened me, told me I was a horrible person, that I was pathetic, and mocked me on social media before blocking me. L stayed living in our apartment, sleeping in my bed, and spending time with her even when I asked him not to. Finally, after a month of him abusing my generosity and emotionally destroying me, he moved out. I helped him, even though B was there and even though I was badly injured. When I dropped by his new place a few days later with stuff he needed, she was there. He told me never to come back to his apartment and said he wanted to go no contact. I'm broken. I'm living in an apartment I can't afford with 2 cats that don't understand why their dad won't come home. I lost my best friend and the person I was planning on spending the rest of my life with, and I'm barely coping. I went on a date with a nice guy, but I'm terrified to open up to anyone because I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable, as the last 2 times went so poorly and damaged my mental health so badly. I barely eat because I can't afford groceries, but I can't move because my cats and I need to stay close to work for my graduate program. I lost a family through this, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. Edit 1. There's some concern about ages. I was 18 when we started dating. I turned 25 in 2 months. No pedophilia here, friends. Edit 2. I understand I was naive. I should have stood up for myself. I didn't know what I was doing. This was my first major relationship. I am getting help. I never said I wasn't learning from this. I likely won't see your horrible comments, but I hope you feel better from posting them. Thank you to everyone who has been kind. I didn't ask for anything, I was just trying to get a horrible situation off my chest. Story 8. I was her backup plan. About 20 years ago I met a woman who I had an instant attraction to. I found out she was recently divorced. I pursued her. She seemed interested. I asked her out, we started dating, eventually we moved in together. This all happened over the course of 2 years. We were supposedly taking it slow because she was still sensitive about the breakup of her marriage. I thought things were great and I was really in love. I was planning on asking her to marry me if things worked out with us living together. After just 2 months I came home and she had packed all her things and informed she was going back to her ex and they were going to work things out. I was hurt, but I knew she still had feelings for him, so I wished her well and tried to be understanding. She said she waited until I was home to tell me in person, which I thought was weird since she decided to pack her belongings first. I had a vague feeling that she was just going to ghost me and I came home before she could leave. She got back with her ex and I started dating other women again. After about a year she contacted me just to see how I was doing. We talked and she let me know things didn't work out for her and her ex and she wanted to see me again. I was still into her, so I agreed and we started dating again. Another 6 months went by. We moved back in together and everything was going great and I still wanted to settle down with her and she was also feeling the same. Once again, after about 4 months this time, she comes to me and lets me know that she wants to date other men because she was still young and in her whole life she had only been with her ex-husband and with me and she wanted to know what was out there. Again, I wished her well and I moved out. She wanted to be roommates while she dated. I couldn't do that, so I moved out. I knew we would never be together after that and made up my mind to move on, but I was hurting. Not even 2 weeks went by and I found out she had met another guy at her work. She was a bartender, and he was the reason she wanted to start dating again and didn't seem to care when I told her I was moving out. I don't know how long they were talking before I left, but he moved in not even 2 weeks later. When I found this out, I was hurting even more. It took 2 years before I could convince her to move in with me, but only 2 weeks for this guy. I eventually start to get over it. After about 6 months I'm still sad but seeing other women. Around that time one of her friends contacted me and wanted to speak to me. I was confused because she was her friend, not mine, and I didn't feel we were particularly close. So we meet and I'm dreading that it was a setup, get me and her friend back together again. I still had feelings for her but no longer wished to pursue a relationship. She starts the conversation by saying that it's not her place but she felt I deserved better. She goes on to tell me that her friend, my ex-girlfriend, had confided in her a long time ago that she wasn't really into me at all, but I was a good guy with a solid career and secure future to settle down with in case nothing better came along. I was stunned by this and it was like someone flipped a switch. Instantly, my feelings for this girl were gone. Thinking back, it all made sense. I knew it was true. I always knew I wasn't her first choice and I was okay with that, but to find out that I was her last choice killed whatever feelings I had left for her. I thanked her and paid the check, and as I was leaving she warned me that things didn't go well with the other guy and her friend had mentioned getting back together with me. Sure enough, a couple weeks went by. She started texting me asking how I was doing, sending me provocative selfies, and even showing up at my usual hangouts. I ignored the texts and pretended not to see at the club and made a quick exit the first time. The second time I was with a date and then I noticed that when she saw that, she made the hasty exit that time. She seemed to get the message after that and didn't contact me for a couple years after that. I'm ashamed to say the last time she contacted me, I felt a grim satisfaction that she seemed desperate and lonely while hinting we should see each other again. Not going to lie, I still harbor resentment. I'm settled down with a wonderful woman now and she knew that when she contacted me and still did anyway. Story 9. I got both sides of a cheating story. At my first job out of college I became quick friends with another guy, Scott, 3 years older than me. We would pal around hitting the bars and such in town. As we opened up more to each other, he told me about how his last girlfriend, Jody, cheated on him. He shared after she broke up with him he was heartbroken, couldn't eat or sleep, felt that constant anxiety about it. I had had a similar experience with my first girlfriend when she broke it off with me. Jody worked at the same place as us but in a different building. She was the daughter of a prominent figure in town and her family really liked Scott. They dated for a little over a year and he thought she was the one, until a week before Christmas when she abruptly and without warning broke up with him. It took Scott a long time to get over her and that was compounded by the fact it came out she was pregnant that following spring. When the child was born Scott figured out that she had to have gotten pregnant about 4 weeks at most after the breakup. She quickly married the guy and they are actually still together today with a second child. Years start ticking and over that span I met my wife, got engaged, married, she took a job for a year, then switched to where I worked. My wife, Emma, works with Jody directly and they become quick friends. Scott I started hanging out less and less as I got more involved with Emma and started spending more weekends with her. We were LDR for about 18 months. Emma isn't shy and asked about Jody's relationship with Scott. Jody stated that while initially the relationship was good, as time passed Scott had more and more red flags. First, he was really immature for 25 years old, he seemed to want to still live a college life, he liked to go out drinking a lot, but always had too much and would piss the bed in his sleep, he didn't really have any plans future-wise, and had a lot of deep bigoted opinions. He also didn't put a lot of effort into the relationship, like dates, communication, etc. She was pretty much over it months before finally ending it. She would bring up concerns and he would always play victim, guilt trip her, all while her family thought he was just great, and would kind of dismiss her concerns if she talked to them about Scott. Jody said her family didn't hide the fact that they were upset she broke up with him. Finally, she had enough, knew she just had to end it, take her things and go. She needed to be quick and stern, and not show emotion, or she would just get guilt into staying. And that's what she did in December. Not wanting to just sit around wallowing, she took a friend up on an invite to a New Year's Eve party where she met a guy, Carter. They exchanged info that night and had their first official date that week. When Jody started puberty in middle school, she had horrible menstrual symptoms and had been taken to see a specialist. They managed to get her symptoms under control, but through the test discovered she did have a reproductive issue. I don't remember what, but she did tell Emma. The doctors told her and her parents then that it would be extremely unlikely that she ever conceive naturally. Jody, always thinking she was sterile, admitted to Emma she wasn't the best at using protection and never had been on birth control. Her and Carter's relationship turned sexual almost immediately, and because of Jody's belief they didn't use any form of contraception, and she got pregnant against the odds. They took that whirlwind situation and got married right away as well. 3 years later they tried and had a second child without much effort, making her question if she really had these complications at all, and thankful that she hadn't accidentally got pregnant in HS or college. Up to the point he moved away, Scott avoided Jody like she was plague. He always believed she had been cheating and that's why she broke up with him. He never once talked about their relationship as having any issues or problems. I had to admit I did agree with Jody's assessment of immaturity. Over our time as friends I saw that Scott really didn't seem to ever want to grow up. Even with his wife, after a couple years of dating, his first grand gesture was to buy her a promise ring like they were HS sophomores. And he was in his 30s by this point. We're all in our 40s now. Scott moved back to his hometown and finally married his now wife. They have 3 kids. Few years later Emma and I moved on. Jody and her husband still live in the same place. I always think of this story when I hang out in the relationship threads on Reddit, because you only ever get one side of a story. Wonder how many are as vastly different as this one once you get the other side. Story 10. My ex-GF is begging me to not continue with the complaint, but I will. So I was with them for 3 years and for me everything was fine. We were the classic couple, always together, doing everything together, going everywhere together and all this stuff just like she wants, and for me it was okay. But everything changed 2 months ago when I discovered that she was cheating on me with one of my friends. After that I discovered the cheating. I don't made any type of scene, I never screamed, I never cried or anything of these things that I hate. I just told her that we were over and we immediately broke up. Of course she tried to change my mind with tears, begged me for forgiveness, tried to hug me, but I always refused because cheating is the only thing I will never forgive to anyone. She spent 2 months on stalking me on social media with fake accounts. She tried to contact me with new numbers and even made all her friends to contact me, but I had always refused to do anything for her. I wasn't even mad, I was just in shock and couldn't believe that she did that to me since I have done everything I could for her. I always made her surprises, expensive and not gifts. We were going to vacations in beautiful places. I was romantic with her, bringing flowers, chocolate, making her special meals. I even took cooking classes for her, so the cheating came out of the blue for me. I love to work out, so my physique isn't a problem, and even sex wasn't a problem because I heard her many times with her female friends saying how lucky she was to find a guy that can satisfy her. Anyway, 1 month ago I bought a new car because my old one was having serious problems, and the mechanic, a family friend, told me clearly to get rid of it because the cost of maintenance was too high, so I did. I bought my new car and installed some cameras and a security system inside because since it's new and is very expensive I wanted it to be protected. So 3 weeks ago at morning I found out my brand new car being completely destroyed, broken windows, striped everywhere, and with a note on the front, "Please, I just want to talk with you." I immediately knew that she was the one that made all the disaster, and the cameras recorded that too. The same day I went to the police with the proofs to sue her, and after a few days I received a message from a new number where she was begging me to withdraw the complaint because she was having a job interview, and if they knew about it she would have lost the opportunity for the job. I never replied to her messages in this months and I never will, and of course I'm not withdrawing the complaint. It's been 2 weeks that she is calling me and messaging me to withdraw the complaint, but I will do it because for me any action have consequences, and you must think before of the action about the consequence and not after begging. It don't work with me. So, at the end, my ex will not have her job and I will have my car repaired, and for me everything is fine, although she is still messaging and calling me, but I will never change my mind. Story 11. An old man gave me the advice of a lifetime. Many, many years ago, when I was young, strong, and handsome, I was jogging along Chicago's lakefront one summer day, and after a while, I got tired and looked for a bench to rest. I found one, on which an old man was sitting. I stopped and asked him if I could sit next to him. He said yes with a smile. I sat there resting, with my mind elsewhere, of which the old man took notice. He asked if everything was okay. I replied yes, just a bit tired, as I smiled at him. He replied that from the expression on my face, my mind was many miles away. I told him that I was getting married soon and that I wasn't sure if I was marrying the right person. He smiled and asked me if I loved this woman. I said yes. And here is the advice that he gave me. He said that a person is like a diamond. The diamond is a stone that someone took the time to cut and polish according to their skill and interpretation of beauty. Some people will find that diamond as a thing of beauty, while for others, it won't be to their taste. He told me that I should not look for a diamond to marry, but to look for a stone that I could cut and shape to my liking, and that will be happy, because that will be the perfect diamond for me. I thanked him for his advice and continued on my morning run. That was 44 years ago, and soon, my wife and I will be celebrating our 43rd anniversary. I think of that old man and his advice on every anniversary. Story 12. Estranged ex-GF came back after 10 years and called me a liar when she found out I already moved on. I don't know how to start this story, and it has happened a few months ago. Had a 10-year backstory. Back when I was 14 years old, I fell in love with one of my classmates in school. She's kinda gullible in a cute way, and laughs so hard at my jokes even at her expense. I started courting her, and she was hesitant at first given that we were very close friends, but she told me she'd give me a chance since she loves being around me. After 3 to 4 months of courting, she then said yes, and we became officially BF and GF. We fell in love so hard and dated until we graduated high school. After the graduation, it was summer break, she told me she needs to live with her sister in the capital city, for college. I told her that it would be okay for us and we can make a long-distance relationship work. I studied at one of the universities in our province, and she went with her sister in the city and decided to take a year off before enrolling in college. We communicated a lot for the few months of us being away. I called her for our 4th anniversary, and told me that no matter what I should wait for her. But, then few months later she suddenly disappeared. I can't call her phone, her social media accounts became inactive. And her friends got friended by her new account. I was hurt that she tried to ghost me. When I tried to reach out, and was ignored, it broke me. Suddenly, she became somebody that I used to know. Yeah, love that song. One of her friend comes to the same campus that I went, and I saw her one time. I just politely said hello to her, and she asked me to go out at a cafe near our campus after classes. We met at the cafe and told me that my ex said she was sorry, and gave me a letter she sent. The letter said that she can't make it work having a long-distance BF, and she just want to move on and wished me best. It freaking hurts. I thanked her friend, went to my boarding house and cried ugly, but I decided to respect her decision and moved on too. A year passed, and I met a girl in a workshop I attended. We have the same line of course, just different school. I asked for her number to communicate with some stuff about the workshop. She was tomboyish, so at first I didn't really notice her in a romantic way. But we became friends. I end up hanging with her every night. She is taking night classes, she's a working student. As we hang out, she became more girly. Don't know the proper term, more feminine I guess. She started wearing fit clothes, and I noticed her face is pretty when her hair is not ponytailed, and her sexy body just awed me. After almost a year, we are both 3rd year in college, I courted her, and she excitedly said yes, saying that she liked me for the longest time. She just don't want to initiate something because it was kinda frowned upon in our country. Now, we're both professionals, have a cute daughter, together for 8 years, and married for 2. Suddenly, I got a call from an unknown number. She introduced as my ex-GF, asking if we could meet. I hesitated but agreed, in one condition: I have to bring my wife. She became furious on the phone, called me a liar and manipulator. But she still insisted in meeting me without my wife, told her I would meet her in a public place. We went to a mall and talked in a stall. I started the conversation with, "Hi, how have you been?" She told me she had a 4-year-old son, but got separated with her partner. Her partner was a seafarer and cut communication with her, and just sending her money through his mother. And told me she went back to our province for me, and when she found out I was married and had a daughter, she got shocked because I promised her that I'd wait for her. I was stunned with the audacity. As she stuttered while trying to control her crying, I stopped her and told her, gritting my teeth, "Thank you for coming back for me. But she can't just come back in my life after 10 years, after abandoning me, having a son and other relationships, and come back to me when all of it failed, expecting me to hold a 10-year-old promise that she broke first." Told her to never contact me again. I stood up, thanked the staffs in the stall, eyes red from my emotions, and went to my wife and daughter on another restaurant. My wife asked me how it went, and I told her I'll tell the story when we went home, because I'm furious that time. Went home, told her the story, she hugged me. I am very thankful with everything I have right now. That ex may be my first love, but my wife is my greatest. Thank you for watching until the end. If you have any feedback at all, I read all comments. I am looking to grow this small channel, so if you think you would watch more content like this, please consider subscribing.